Let's go ahead and move to the next story. So, Trump's planning a birthday military party, but in California, the troops are already on the streets. Thousands took to the streets in Los Angeles and San Francisco this week after Trump unilaterally deployed 2,000 National Guard troops, the first time in decades federal forces entered a state without the governor's approval. The protests really were triggered by mass ICE raids across California, targeting immigrant communities and detaining hundreds of people. Outrage grew after videos of violent arrests were spreading online. In LA, protesters shut down the 101 freeway, torched four self driving cars, and hurled concrete fireworks and scooters at officers. Police responded with rubber bullets, tear gas, and flashbangs that echoed through downtown well into the night. Dozens were injured, including officers and demonstrators. One person was arrested for throwing a cocktail, another for ramming a motorcycle into the police. In San Francisco, 60 people were arrested after clashes left at three officers injured and parts of the financial district vandalized. Governor Newsom condemned the deployment as a, quote, serious breach of state sovereignty. And Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, looking bad in LA, bring in the troops. All of this is unfolding as Trump prepares for his birthday military parade on June 14th. So I am always interested when I see protests and I see media coverage of protests because there really is so many ways to frame a protest. There's so many ways to show one side of a story. Even the caption and the music overlay that you could put on a video can make it seem like, oh, this protest is out of control. All people are doing is vandalizing vehicles and like hurting the police. And then you can flip to the other side, and all of a sudden, all we're seeing is the peaceful protest side. So, from a media point of view, whose truth are we seeing, and how are we really like helping people to be able to discern between these things online?
Yeah, I think I'll say one of the things before Dickey jumps in that strikes me about protesting in 2025. There's so much really strong media content. When I say strong, I mean it's able to get people's attention. Right, this is the whole attention economy. You can't go anywhere without your attention being grabbed by some sign, some sound, some alert, some subscribe, whatever it is. Right. So as a protester, you've got to get above that noise. And it's not like protests against Trump's immigration rhetoric or policies started Friday. This has been
Mm,
going on for a decade. There are folks who work really hard, some through like the legal system. For folks who aren't in California, we know this living in California. There's immigration assistance lawyers and organizations everywhere. We run into these folks constantly, and of course there's folks on the ground, different organizations that help people immigrate to the United States. But the news media generally only covers these protests when they get violent or out of control. And
mm,
so
mm,
this creates a weird situation where some protesters say like we have to create that kind of viral moment to get
mm,
the media's attention down here.
Mm.
I'm not saying that's what happened here, but I know that a lot from being on the ground. And I'm not necessarily justifying it, but some protesters are right. That's the only way you get attention in a lot of our media system. Peaceful protests where you do the right thing and go to court and file the right paperwork.
mm.
The media doesn't come down to the courthouse. You light a Waymo car on fire in downtown Los Angeles, every news camera is there, especially if you're waving a Mexican flag. So I think
Mm.
the media, would be well served to kind of provide a little more context. This isn't kind of an out of nowhere protest. It's been building and escalating between those who oppose Trump's policy and Trump himself, and it's finally exploded into violence. And I hope for all sides that the violence does not continue to escalate.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. For all sides, the violence escalating really doesn't, it can, violence begets more violence in a sense, which it's very complicated, but, I think your, point, Nolan, about, if only the media could show, more context, would be helpful. But, um, yeah, again, like what sells, and it's these binary storylines of like right versus like the good guys versus the bad guys, the right versus wrong. And it's just more catchy, and it's also a little bit of a kind of a lazy tactic where it's or just a very narrowing and limiting result of that, where the moment is not fully seen. It's, right and wrong kind of obscures that there's a real breakdown that's happening. Who's on sort of one side and who's on the other are not fixed positions. It's always, right and wrong. It's always interacting, and there's, it's a reaction or a shaping and influencing that happens. That is, often caused when power stops listening, and it hardens into, this, we do it this way or we do it that way. And it just perpetuates more collapse. And yeah, when we get caught in this sort of scorekeeping of right versus wrong, we just miss that actual crisis, and which is that people here are being rendered disposable. We yeah, like human suffering is kind of an ideological debate. It's, families are being separated. People are, uh, police, like ICE raids, and police are cracking down, and people are responding with literal fire. And yeah, it's just, we don't always have rebellion. Sometimes seems like it's the only answer when there's no, when we're not looking at the nuance or the complexity. um it's and so yeah, that good versus wrong framing just really kind of serves to keep us in this cycle of hate. We each side's reaction kind of justifies more escalation. And um when it becomes about like winning the argument, or um yeah, proving yourself right or wrong, we don't see what happens when human dignity starts, yeah, becoming a policy debate, or that is negotiable. We just, yeah, we get caught in a spiral. And so I think the more important question of, not just asking who's right, but the more important question is, like, what's breaking down here, and how do we stop feeding that breakdown? And it just, there's sort of an imaginary step in this process that I think we really miss when, yeah, we see very dualistically.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think our political class and media play a role in that too. Though, like we talk about immigration as such like a simple issue. It's like, oh, some people cross border, some without papers. It's like
Mm.
it's so much more complex than that. And like even the way Trump was like, I'm just going to round up 12 million on day one. First of all, I would never justify that policy. But you've only rounded up 100,000. I mean, you're so far from your number. Even if we could achieve it, I think that's one thing. And the speed at which you've done it has been because you've ignored due process. We could get a lot accomplished if you ignore the law, right? I mean, so, but we talk about it in such simplistic ways, people don't realize those complexities. And I'll throw one other one too, that because Dickey brought up the humanity part of it. Context is really important, and we talk a lot in this country about globalization. But you have to remember this: since the 1980s, we've globalized for capital. Big business can go wherever it wants and find whatever workers it wants, whatever tax conditions it wants, whatever regulations it wants. We did not globalize labor. So workers cannot go to whatever country they want and get
Mm.
whatever retirement they want, or, work livable wage, or benefits. They're stuck where they are, and they have to wait for capital to come to them. That's the system that the political class set up in the 1990s, and that the media, I think, has really left the public uninformed on when it comes to globalization. But that's why you have so many people moving to different locations. These are people who their alternative is to get exploited by some American corporation down in Mexico, or maybe they can sneak into the United States and try to get a livable wage. That part of the story is just completely left out, how the US and the Western powers play a role in creating these conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And one sec. Edit this out. I need to plug my computer in.
We are leaving this in, this power situation.
My computer power. Okay. So the thing I was going to add to this, I think both to Nolan and Dickey, your points about power, about humans, I think some of the things that we even forget that I've been actually very proud to see online, in terms of people wanting to be more educated about these topics and wanting to be well informed and remind people of their rights. I think it's very important to remind people that a legal status does not determine your rights and the rights of your constitutional rights that you have when you live in the United States. And so that's something that I think people can forget. But more so than that, I think there's also a sense of just the dehumanization of all of it. There's been so many, and we can put in a clip of this if we want to, of this image of people really kind of humiliating or making fun of deportations, when in reality, families are being torn apart. People are getting taken away from their children, or their children are getting taken away. This is something that, when it comes to making fun of it, I'm just not quite sure I see like the media's angle or individual people's angle of wanting to really bring this as a point of something to poke fun at, or something that people find entertaining. I'm just not quite sure what to do with that. And really, I think the key here is to just continue educating people and allowing people to see that there are people who are hurting here. There are people that are going through things that are unimaginable. And I think that that's really difficult to see, is people going on social media, or people going into media spaces and really seeing this as a form of entertainment.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And I do want to throw another villain in here though too, which is the media is kind of, I do see that how much of a predicament news media are in right now, because they covered pretty hard the human rights abuses
Mm,
during the first Trump administration, the kids in cages and the separation policy and things like that. And, 4 years later, the public came back and voted for Trump, who had a much more aggressive anti-immigrant message of deporting 12 million people. So the other villain I like to throw in here too is the Democratic Party.
mm,
I think a lot of there were some activists, particularly loud activists online in the Democratic Party, who wanted completely open borders. But the majority of Democrats, and I would argue probably all the nationally elected figures, with the exception of maybe a handful, always knew you needed some balance. Some immigration was necessary, but you couldn't have total open borders. We need to fix the system so it moves faster, more efficiently. But that message never really got out, because the two people with that message were Joe Biden, who, couldn't string together a sentence, and Kamala Harris, who they basically hid in the closet. And when she did come out, had these word salads. And so what you end up with is the Trump administration has really been able to dominate the narrative. They keep saying
mm,
that, like, Biden just had this total open border and all these immigrants are here, and that's why you need to give up your civil liberties and give me more power. And there's not really a message of resistance in the media, whether it comes from the PR, the Democratic Party, or the news media. And so I think that's why Trump has really been able to monopolize this topic, even
mm,
though he's not achieving the goals he set out, and he's ignoring things like due process for U.S. citizens. There's just hasn't really been a strong alternative.
Hey Detoxers! Thanks for tuning in. You can find Disinfo Detox on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share. Every click helps grow the community and keeps those tech overlords happy. Detox complete.